right, so this is Todd Atkins. I'm back with another episode of MMA Conspiracy Hour. It's been a little bit since we did this, and I'm back with Miguel Adorado, who has a new project, MMA Museum, that we'll talk about. But today we're going to talk about Francis Ngannou, boxing first, plus that he's looking at PFL and ONE FC. So Miguel, I wanted to give you to give your opening thoughts on this.
Ngannou, it has not been a huge media, like looking to be all over the media everywhere. So when he talks, people listen. And, these news that he would return to MMA with one of the other companies is, kind of fresh news, and people are reacting to it. To me, the interesting thing about the landscape that Ngannou is looking at is that you've got obviously a boxing match that's going to pay off. But then your second biggest payday after that is probably John Jones, especially after Jones's recent victory. I mean, that's eventually going to be the fight that people are going to want to see. And maybe Dana just says, no way, and that's it. And then he can go to one, or he can go to the others. But one, if you look at their roster, and I think the PFL is the same, heavyweights are tough, quality people on, and there's nobody there that jumps out at you as like, I would love to see that guy fight. They may have heavyweights, they may have very good heavyweights. I'm sure one may have another Russian killer from somewhere, because their rosters from that part of the world too. But that doesn't mean that people want to pay to see that. And at the end of the day, one in Francis, who knows how that payment and things get executed, has nothing to do with the American tax system or anything. So who knows what they can pull off. Maybe they'll pay him in Bitcoin. but I mean, the thing is they say the idea is it going to be big money? It can be, but if they don't have an opponent that doesn't attract the people, then maybe they're throwing the money away. And that's what Dana always sort of counts on. I do think, like I said, John Jones is now the best match for Ngannou besides Tyson Fury, and even at the banker's end. And Dana's always going to have that in his back pocket. If he wants him back, if they need to do something, he has that. If not, he can just let Ngannou die with one of the other promotions. Ngannou's not such a needle mover that if he signs with one and they have him fight an average guy that nobody knows, that they're going to get huge ratings. They may get some people who move over and see, but there's a lot of hardcore people that watch that. That's what they'll get. But the masses, it's not. Ngannou's not Tyson Fury's the A side of that boxing match. Deontay Wilder's the A side of that boxing match. Why? Ngannou doesn't move the needle like they do. So, and as for Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, it should be a short night for those guys. Ngannou hits very hard, but the other guys, especially Fury, if Deontay Wilder had a hard time, reaching Fury, Ngannou's skill set is just not ready for this, and not the sophistication of true boxing. And I think it would be good for this to be shown in its pure, most unadulterated form. I don't know what type of show or shenanigans are going to be going around, and people are angry, this, that. I'm not saying anybody's faking any fights, but I'm saying the show takes away from what's really intriguing here, which is Ngannou wants to try this. Ngannou shouldn't go more than 4 rounds with either of those guys, just based on skill.
Let me ask you this. You've match made over, 200 shows? What would you do with Ngannou if you were told, okay, Miguel, I need you to start this guy. We're going to put him in boxing. What would you do? Tell me.
I'm not a boxing matchmaker with all the connections that would require, but that's the thing that because he has not paid those dues as a young man, at 20 making your boxing debut, where, they knew you had trouble with a hooker, so they got you a guy who throws big hooks, so you could practice and work your stuff. And guys guiding people through the early process of seeing what they can do in actual competition. That's boxing. He's circumventing all that and fighting the world champion. And that should show. It should show. We should see a difference. It should be that simple, especially at heavyweight. Deontay Wilder, too. Wilder, I don't think is going to feel like Ngannou is very sophisticated. They're going to call him plain vanilla. He comes forward, throws big punches. He can't kick. He can't do any of the things that he does in MMA. You really have no scouting on him except for his style there. Sure, he's tightening up his boxing and stuff, but again, that's a crash course compared to a lifetime for the other guys. I mean, Wilder started late too, but at this point, Wilder's got more than a decade in this, so it's the same thing. The experience level should show. But he grabs his payday and then comes back to MMA. It's actually a good strategy for him. But I think you're missing the point that Jones is going to be the elephant in the room everywhere he goes.
Let me ask you this: when it comes to PFL and ONE FC, would it be worth it? Like you're talking about, he doesn't move the needle, but would it be worth it to sign, kind of as to say, look, we planted our flag, we've signed Francis Ngannou, this is going to be a big publicity at least, and that'll kind of stabilize our name as a legitimate organization?
Who won?
ONE or PFL, as far as getting their name out in the United
PFL,
States MMA scene.
I think PFL hurts more for legitimacy. ONE, I think, hurts for recognition now. They're not known by everybody. But I think once they hit with their show and the quality, also the intrigue of the different rules and system that they bring, I think that ONE could look at it that way, that it's a flag planter, like signing, the biggest guy out there and stuff. But again, they're going to struggle for an opponent. They're going to, and back in MMA, you can't just throw him in with anyone. And ONE is also pretty strict with what's going to happen is he's going to eat the long end of a couple of 14-0 Russians, and you might be looking at Ngannou losing everything he has. Because, if the Russians come heavy in wrestling and they're big, there's a Russian now in the UFC heavyweight division that's beginning to leap out and stand out. Yeah, they come in quality. They throw 10 Russians at you, and every once in a while, one of them is a world beater, and we all know that. And that could happen to Ngannou at ONE. And ONE won't put him in with, a 14-10 guy just for just to get him a match. They have certain parameters that they like in terms of performances, winning streaks, and things like that they look at, especially for a fight that will get that much eyes on it. So I think it could be looked at as a glossy move. I think it might be a mistake to do it that way. I think ONE has their first show in the United States planned May 5th. So it's, basically 6 weeks away. And I'm sure we're going to hear about it. But the media machine is not comparable to the UFC's. By now, we've heard a lot, and there's, 6 weeks out from a UFC fight, it's been built. And here at ONE, you've got Demetrius Johnson returning for a really intriguing rematch, a trilogy bout. You got grappling guys, you got kickboxing, you got World Muay Thai champion coming. They put together a fantastic card, but the media attention hasn't reached what the UFC's in. So having Ngannou may only get them so far.
Now, where would PFL benefit from it? We talked about ONE FC. Where would PFL benefit?
Well, PFL has these $1 million tournaments that attract people, and sometimes you get, some imbalances in there where, they attract a really good guy. Is that what they're going to do? A big, top that with a bigger money tournament of some type, 5 million, and try to get the best guys in there and put Ngannou there. PFL, is more of a last stop for people too, right? or people trying to come up and establish themselves. Or I don't count that. I think ONE's more serious. I think Bellator is also at times capable of doing what you're talking about, which is that splashy signing and then fucking it up. But that's they can do that. So Bellator might even be in there, and Bellator might even be a better move for him than the PFL. Do you watch PFL? There's too much MMA out there, and the PFL's off my radar for in these last couple of years. I see the results. I watch highlights when I can and stuff, but they haven't generated a lot of interest. And I think, if they can't catch my interest, the fact is the average fan is really going to hurt for them catching their interest. Their product's average. It's good.
Yeah, Francis said he was down to PFL and ONE FC. He didn't mention Bellator.
No, Francis only cares about money. And Bellator may not have made you. I'm just saying that if they did, I think Bellator would be a better place to go than PFL. I don't think PFL is, one of the top 3 or 4 leagues in the world.
Plus, I think, like you were saying, PFL kind of, because it's on ESPN, it kind of feels almost like a UFC kind of sister promotion or whatever, in a way.
Yeah, they've gone through many iterations and none of them have, made the needle jump very far. So, I think it is. I think what it is it's a product that's out there like minor league baseball. You can on cable, you flip through your channels. If you have a minor league team there, you can catch the games, and that's what I think ESPN thinks about PFL, or UFC at least thinks about PFL. UFC also, when they do the aggression and against other promotions and stuff, PFL hasn't even ever come on their radar, really. It's not like they aggressively signed Kayla Harrison or anything like that. They've done nothing. PFL is small. Ngannou would be grabbing the money, and I don't think it would be a satisfactory end. I think Ngannou also wants to do big things. I think it's money first, but he also is in a spot where he can still think about legacy. He hasn't, tarnished it or done really poorly in any showing. So there's still that hope. Maybe he beats, Tyson Fury. Maybe he lands that big punch. Who knows? But he has that hope. He hasn't lost that. It'll change when he's just grabbing money later, after he loses. But that's where we are now. Ngannou's got, the UFC is not even an option for him anymore either. So, he's got to do that boxing match, probably lose, and then go back to wherever he goes with a loss on his record and with what that pressure brings.
I want to ask you, it was kind of strange how the media all jumped in with Dana White's narrative that Francis is not getting any offers, like he said after the Jones fight, kind of, it was weird. Now all this is kind of turning around in the last couple of days. Why do you think the media bid on that?
Dana, it doesn't surprise me. Dana has their attention, and Dana, they follow him around. Everything he says is on tape somewhere, and you've got a running narrative of him. So this was just the latest edition of it. The media, I don't think, does a real great job, obviously, in terms of criticism or things like that they should be held accountable for. But Dana has a way of shutting that down. You don't get into the shows. You can't, you don't get the scoop. You don't know. Now you're writing second, the fighters may shit on the system in private. Maybe they don't, maybe they do, but they'll never say anything in public, right? Because there's that atmosphere there. So, yeah, I think the media is just, doing what they normally do. Go to Dana because they need stories, and Dana talks and provides stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, common sense would tell you he can't announce anything if he doesn't have anything signed to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they just run with this idea that Francis isn't getting any offers or he's alone, blah, blah, blah,
The Dana knows what I know, what I said earlier, is that he's not easy to match up. There may be, physically in what you're dealing with an elite guy, right? There are other guys in that neighborhood. They're all on the table. We know who they are, unless you're going to go out and get, he doesn't exist anymore. He's ancient now, but like a Alexander Karelin, like that kind of legendary wrestler or something like that would intrigue people. You don't have a naturally made opponent for Ngannou besides the boxers we talked about. And then John Jones. That's the advantage Dana has over everybody, is that at the end of the day, you can't match that guy up with just anybody. What are you going to do? Put him in with, there are guys who might make a credible showing and give you a real train. You could do it, but it still wouldn't be Ngannou to me too also is the kind of guy that he needs that big fight to motivate him too. So he's not going to even want to sign. I mean, I don't mean to disrespect anybody, but like Matt Mitrione. Matt Mitrione is a good fighter. He's retired recently, but you could get that guy. He's probably young enough. You can get him in a training camp, get him ready in 3 months, and he'll come in and do what he does. And there'll be big punches thrown, and maybe that's an interesting match. But Mitrione has already played his career out. He's already done his thing. So it will always be looked at as something like Ngannou's taking a bye fight, and he's beyond that. So again, that's the conundrum of being Ngannou, is that there aren't opponents jumping out that make sense in terms of the wallet too.
Who do you think he goes with ultimately, MMA wise at least?
I almost see him coming back to the UFC.
Really? Wouldn't that take a while though? I mean,
oh yeah, it'll
just
play
repair
itself out. It'll play itself out. But what will happen on the UFC's end is, okay, they're building up the Stipe fight with John Jones, and it's natural because Stipe is among the most decorated heavyweight champions they have in terms of defenses and things. But he's a fireman. They left him on the shelf for 3 years. When was the last time we had a consistent dose of Stipe? So they're bringing him out for this one. It's not the best of circumstances, but it's the best fight they have. Okay, now who? Who's next? That big Russian? It will be very interesting if I'm very apologetic for not. I don't want to get the guy's name wrong, so I'm just going to refer to him as the up and coming UFC Russian fighter in the heavyweight division that they have. But that's bad news for John Jones, because I don't know if he's got anybody like that on his resume, and that's a tough one. And John's been to the top for so long too. Maybe he's just superior and carries through. But that would be a real challenge if the UFC were to ask him to do that, and they wind up with a Russian champion. That's bad for business. They don't need that belt going to Russia, and then the guy maybe fighting, not fighting, this, that, the other thing. Maybe he lives elsewhere at this point, but all that becomes very complicated, especially when you're going to have they've done well at times with Anderson and guys like that, but Anderson, when he held the belt, wasn't Dana's favorite dude. He was a guy that didn't speak English that much. Anderson could be, march to the beat of his own drum when he wanted to and stuff, and there were times where he got under his skin. A Russian guy like that that's non-communicative, you can't send him out to do the Good Morning America tours. He's not doing the talk shows. And start with that. So and say John Jones does get through this Russian. How far do you need me to go before I mention Ngannou again? I mean, talk about natural opponents. Who's the UFC after the Russian? What's on the landscape in the UFC's heavyweight division? Who can we see that they might be able to build up to that level? We're talking about years. It's a light division.
To be fair, we can't assume the Russian's going to beat Curtis Blades. The Russian Sergey Pavlovich, but we can't assume he's going to win the fight. They're having a fight. Maybe
Absolutely.
Blades wins that.
I love Curtis. I think Curtis, Curtis maybe, hopefully, is the right guy to get this guy, because I think sometimes when you put him in with a guy like, Curtis is a test of a veteran for this guy. And I'm not disrespecting him at all. But even if Curtis blitzes him, Curtis has played out a lot of his career already. He's had his ups and downs. I'm not criticizing, but I don't think that becomes the John Jones fight. I mean, they may have to make the fight, but it's not going to be a threat to, McGregor Mayweather in terms of box office. And that's, I think, what the main thing that Ngannou wants, Tyson Fury wants. That's the main common goal. John Jones is to be that top hit, face, to be that top earner, to be that top person that gets the eyes and stuff. I think that is a lot of prestige in the modern world, and that's what makes that crossover boxing, MMA, and stuff they share those worlds, so the crossovers are made easier. But yeah, you're talking about elite guys. That's it. And then once you get through that, it becomes average.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. I think it's a good thing to end on. Now, Miguel, I want you to talk about MMA Museum a little bit since you're working with this project.
Well, it's interesting the conversation we just had because, like I said, the UFC is big and powerful, and they crush people and they crush things. And they claim to love the sport at times, but I ran into a situation where I just did a Google search for MMA memorabilia, and the first thing that comes up is gloves on the UFC's website for $250, which is a lot, with Hasbullah's image. Now, Hasbullah, as far as I can tell, has never done anything in the world of fighting except for maybe hang out with a few fighters and sponsor guys. He's wealthy. He's a YouTube personality. But that's MMA memorabilia. That's painful. That's painful. That's not a real indicator of the history that could be lost there. So I do think that there's a good spot for a museum, a place to house things, and it's time. We haven't lost a lot of people yet, but we have lost people. There are people that have left us a little bit early, and you're left with, now what? Will they be forgotten, or will some of the things that they've done in this sport that moved us, can it be remembered? And I don't think Dana's not the right guy to do that, because Dana's a UFC company, and there is more beyond. Is the UFC the biggest? Absolutely. They've done the best, fights for 2 decades. But there is a lot, especially before, that runs danger of being forgotten. So I think an MMA museum and not a UFC museum is a noble goal. And so we'll see. We'll see. I hope it's not just an internet project. I'd like it to be a ground museum, but there's a lot of work to be done. So we'll see. We'll see. But we'll do that. We'll do interviews, more of a historic nature, and bring up a few guests and things. So we have some ideas. We released an episode showing a memorabilia piece, and I think it's a pretty cool episode. So if you get a chance, take a look at it at MMA Collector on YouTube.
MMA Collector. And what's the guy's name that you're working with on it?
Ed Tyson. Ed Tyson's he's the guy who owns the collection. And he's been wanting to show it, display it in some ways, and we got together and put together a little plan to reveal but not reveal everything, do the best we can, get some motion, because at the end of the day, if you search MMA memorabilia, I would like for something else to come up than Hasbullah's gloves. I mean, it's okay. Hasbullah's making his money anyway, and they'll sell, for those wherever. But, memorabilia has this, kind of like unique touch to it, like it's a love too, right? So it would be best that was populated by people who, really cared about that stuff, and not just mass marketing.
What is Ed's background in MMA? I mean, how do you come up with this stuff?
I think he's been collecting for 2 decades. So just like me and you in the 90s, holy Toledo, what the hell was that? When the UFC popped on the radar, at some point, as he, got into, he's our age, so he's run a business for 20 years and things like that. And at some point, he's got the means to collect, and he's put together quite a little collection. And he's also got the greater good of the sport in mind, and that's always interesting. It's not always easy to find. So we'll see. Starting from scratch, but I think the memorabilia side is something that it was hot a few years ago, giving me hope that people enjoy the stuff and things there. But I think a lot of people have been let down, and they don't even have an outlet anymore. So we'll see if we get some movement in there, and movement towards a museum. If not, at the very least, a very high quality virtual museum.
All right, Miguel, I want to thank you for taking time to do another episode, and for everyone that supports the MMA Conspiracy Hour. Until next time,
Thank
see you
you.
later.